If, during this discourse, anything is said which is opposed to your way of thinking and belief, just listen, do not resist. You may be right, and I may be wrong, but by listening and considering together, we are going to find out what is the truth. Truth cannot be given to you by somebody. You have to discover it. And to discover, there must be a state of mind in which there is direct perception. There is no direct perception when there is resistance. I'm going to point out to you what is, and not translate it according to my fancy, nor should you translate it or interpret it according to your background or training. We can have understanding of what is when we recognize it without condemnation, without justification, without identification. To know that one is in a certain condition, in a certain state, is already a process of liberation. But a man who is not aware of his condition, of his struggle, tries to be something other than he is, which is habit. To follow it, you need a very swift mind and a pliable heart, which are denied when the mind is static, fixed in a belief, in a prejudice, in an identification. And a mind and heart that are dry cannot follow easily, swiftly, that which is. Be aware of it as I discuss it. Follow not my words, but the thought which is active in you. What we are trying to do is to follow each other's thoughts, to pursue as far as we can, as profoundly as we can, the intimations, the responses to our feelings. So please, find out what your response is to this cause, to this suffering, not what somebody else's words are, but how you yourself respond. Society is what you and I, in our relationship, have created. It is the outward projection of all our own inward psychological states. Understanding myself is not a matter of time. I can understand myself at this very moment. When you are interested in something, you do it instantaneously. There is immediate understanding, immediate transformation. When that happens, you are completely without a problem, for then the self is not worried about itself. Before we can have any relationship with another, which is society, it is essential that we begin to understand ourselves first. I consider the earnest person to be one who is completely concerned with this, first, and not with how to arrive at a particular goal. To follow oneself, to see how one's thought operates, one has to be extraordinarily alert to the intricacies of one's own thinking and responses and feelings. One begins to have a greater awareness, not only of oneself, but of another with whom one is in relationship. Self-knowledge has no end. You don't come to an achievement, you don't come to a conclusion. Only when the mind is tranquil, through self-knowledge, and not through imposed self-discipline, only then, in that tranquility, in that silence, can reality come into being. It is only then that there can be bliss, that there can be creative action. Then perhaps there can be a transformation in the immediate relationship about us, and so in the world in which we live. Society is the product of our relationship, and if our relationship is confused, egocentric, narrow, limited, national, we project that and bring chaos into the world. There must be a certain amount of imitation, copying in outward technique, but when there is inward psychological imitation, surely we cease to be creative. One of the fundamental causes of the disintegration of society is copying, which is the worship of authority. The world is our relationship, however narrow, and if we can bring a transformation there, not a superficial but a radical transformation, then we shall begin actively to transform the world. To find these true values which will bring about a radical revolution, a transformation or a regeneration, it is essential to understand oneself. Discontent, instead of setting us aflame, causing us to question life, the whole process of existence, is canalized, and thereby we become mediocre, losing that drive, that intensity to find out the whole significance of existence. To transform oneself, self-knowledge is essential. Without knowing what you are, there is no basis for right thought, and without knowing yourself, there cannot be transformation. If you want to know what you are, you cannot imagine or have belief in something which you are not. The understanding of what you are, without distortion, is the beginning of virtue. Virtue is essential, for it gives freedom. It is only in virtue that you can discover, that you can live, not in the cultivation of a virtue, which merely brings about respectability. In order to create a new world, a new structure away from the old, there must be freedom to discover, and to be free there must be virtue, for without virtue there is no freedom. And to understand what is, there must be freedom, freedom from the fear of what is. To understand that process, there must be the intention to know what is, to follow every thought, feeling, and action. When one is interested in understanding what is, the actual state of mind, one does not need to force, discipline, or control it. On the contrary, there is passive alertness, watchfulness. This state of awareness comes when there is interest, the intention to understand. If we merely accumulate knowledge of the self, that very knowledge prevents further understanding, because accumulated knowledge and experience becomes the centre through which thought focuses and has its being. When we follow a method, we must have authorities, the teacher, the guru, the saviour, the master, who will guarantee us what we desire. Authority, in its very nature, prevents the full awareness of oneself, and therefore ultimately destroys freedom. In freedom alone can there be creativeness. The understanding of oneself is seeing oneself from moment to moment in the mirror of relationship, one's relationship to property, to things, to people, and to ideas. Creativeness comes only when the self, which is the process of recognition and accumulation, ceases to be, because, after all, consciousness, as the me, is the centre of recognition, and recognition is merely the process of the accumulation of experience. In order to transform the world about us, with its misery, wars, unemployment, starvation, class divisions, and utter confusion, there must be a transformation in ourselves. If we can understand ourselves as we are from moment to moment, without the process of accumulation, then we shall see how there comes a tranquillity that is not a product of the mind, a tranquillity that is neither imagined nor cultivated, and only in that state of tranquillity can there be creativeness. Consciousness is challenge and response, which is experiencing, then terming or naming, and then recording, which is memory. This process is action. The actor comes into being when action has a result, an end in view. The desire to achieve an end brings about will, which is the actor. These three states which constitute experience, the actor, action, and the result, are surely a process of becoming. We are in this state repeatedly, in the state of experiencing, but we always come out of it and give it a term, naming and recording it, and thereby giving continuity to becoming. If an idea shapes action, then action can never bring about the solution to our miseries, because, before it can be put into action, we have to discover how the idea comes into being. Idea is the outcome of a thought process. The response of a memory to a certain experience brings the thought process into action. You have to find out for yourself, inwardly, whether you are acting on an idea, and if there can be action without ideation. That is the only state in which there is understanding, when the mind, based on experience, is not guiding action. When thought, based on experience, is not shaping action. Love is not the thinking about the person that one loves, for then it is merely thought. You cannot think of love. Therefore love is not an experience. There is no gap between love and action, as there is between idea and action. One has to be aware of this total process, of how ideas come into being, how action springs from ideas, and how ideas control action, and therefore limit action, depending on sensation. Only when one can go beyond the bundle of ideas, which is the me, which is the mind, which has a partial or complete continuity, only when one can go beyond that, when thought is completely silent, is there a state of experiencing. Then one shall know what truth is. This, after all, is the truth, to have the capacity of meeting everything anew from moment to moment, without the conditioning reaction of the past, so that there is not the cumulative effect, which acts as a barrier between oneself and that which is. A belief, religious or political, obviously hinders the understanding of ourselves. It acts as a screen through which we are looking at ourselves. If we have no beliefs with which the mind has identified itself, then the mind, without identification, is capable of looking at itself as it is. And then, surely, there is the beginning of the understanding of oneself. A man who wants peace, and who wants to create a new world, a happy world, surely cannot isolate himself through any form of belief. If you see the significance and validity and the truth of it, it will begin to act. We want to be secure inwardly, and also spiritually, by erecting walls of belief, which are an indication of the craving to be certain. Can the mind free itself from belief? Not find a substitute for it, but be entirely free from it? You cannot verbally answer yes or no to this, but you can definitely give an answer if your intention is to become free from belief. When you go behind it, analyze it, look at it more intelligently and carefully, you will find that the very assertion, I know, is another wall separating you and me. Behind that wall you take refuge, seeking comfort, security. Therefore, the more knowledge a mind is burdened with, the less capable it is of understanding. If we would live at peace with each other, surely ambition must completely come to an end. Not only political, economic, social ambition, but also the more subtle and pernicious ambition, the spiritual ambition to be something. If you would find something new, experience something which is not a projection of your own imagination, your mind must be free. Unfortunately, every time you see something new, you bring in all the information known to you already, all your knowledge, all your past memories, and obviously you become incapable of looking, incapable of receiving anything that is new, that is not the old. We are discussing knowledge that is used as a means to security, the psychological and inward desire to be something. You can only be free from it when you understand the inward nature of the causes that make you hold on to it, not only the conscious, but the unconscious motives as well, that make you believe. We can find out the deeper conscious and unconscious activities if we give the unconscious mind a chance, because it is much quicker in response than the conscious mind. While your conscious mind is quietly thinking, listening and watching, the unconscious mind is much more active, much more alert and much more receptive. It can therefore have an answer. When we see the falseness of all this, the mind then is capable. It may be temporarily for a second, of seeing the truth of it, even though when it is too much for it, it goes back. But to see temporarily is sufficient. If you can see it for a fleeting second, it is enough, because you will then see an extraordinary thing take place. The unconscious is at work, though the conscious may reject. It is not a progressive second, but that second is the only thing, and it will have its own results, even in spite of the conscious mind struggling against it. Belief and knowledge are the process of recognition, the centre of the mind. The process is enclosing, the process is conscious, as well as unconscious. In the mind is the very basis which creates contradiction, which isolates and separates. A man of peace, a man of earnestness, cannot isolate himself and yet talk of brotherhood and peace. A man who is really earnest about this, who wants to discover, has to face the problem of knowledge and belief. He has to go behind it, to discover the whole process of desire at work, the desire to be secure, the desire to be certain. A mind that would be in a state in which the new can take place, whether it be the truth, whether it be God, or what you will, must surely cease to acquire, to gather. It must put aside all knowledge. When do you create? Surely when there is no effort, when you are completely open, when on all levels you are in complete communication, completely integrated. To understand the state of being without strife, that state of creative existence, surely one must inquire into the problem of effort. We mean by effort the striving to fulfill oneself, to become something. In this struggle, we are concerned inevitably with fulfillment through the gaining of an end. We seek self-fulfillment in an object, in a person, in an idea, and that demands constant battle, struggle, the effort to become, to fulfill. Because I am nothing, because I am insufficient, empty, inwardly poor, I struggle to become something, outwardly or inwardly. I struggle to fulfill myself in a person, in a thing, in an idea. To fill that void is the whole process of existence. There is effort only when there is an escape from that inward void through action, through contemplation, through acquisition, through achievement, through power and so on. That is our daily existence. Therefore, action as we know it is really reaction. It is a ceaseless becoming, which is the denial, the avoidance of what is. But when there is awareness of emptiness without choice, without condemnation or justification, then in that understanding of what is, there is action. And this action is creative being. You will understand this if you are aware of yourself in action, observing yourself as you are acting not only outwardly, but see also the movement of your thoughts and feeling. When you are aware of this movement, you will see that the thought process, which is also feeling and action, is based on the idea of becoming. The idea of becoming arises only when there is a sense of insecurity, and that sense of inward security comes when one is aware of the inward void. Through self-knowledge, through constant awareness, you will find that strife, battle, the conflict of becoming, leads you to pain, to sorrow, and ignorance. It is only if you are aware of the inward insufficiency and live with it without escape, accepting it wholly, that you will discover an extraordinary tranquility, which comes with understanding of what is. Only in that state of tranquility is there creative thinking. There is contradiction, so there must be struggle, and struggle is destruction, waste. In that state we can produce nothing but antagonism, strife, more bitterness and sorrow. If we can understand this fully, and hence be free of contradiction, then there can be inward peace, which will bring understanding of each other. If I regard life not as a permanent desire, but as a series of temporary desires, which are constantly changing, then there is no contradiction. Contradiction arises only when the mind has a fixed point of desire. That is when the mind does not regard all desire as moving, transient, but seizes upon one desire and makes that into a permanency. Only then, when other desires arise, is there contradiction. You are seeking lasting gratification, and that gratification you clothe with an idea, a respectable sounding word such as God, truth. The mind is the product of time. Thought is based on yesterday, on the past. And so long as thought is functioning within the field of time, thinking in terms of the future, of becoming, gaining, achieving, there must be contradiction, because then we are capable of looking at what is. Only in realizing, in understanding, in being choicelessly aware of what is there a possibility of freedom from that disintegrating factor which is contradiction. Therefore it is essential to understand the whole process of our thinking, for it is there that we find contradiction. Thought itself has become a contradiction because we have not understood the total process of ourselves, and that understanding is possible only when we are fully aware of our thought, not as an observer operating upon his thought, but integrally and without choice, which is extremely arduous. Then only is there the dissolution of that contradiction which is so detrimental, so painful. So long as we are trying to achieve a psychological result, so long as we want inward security, there must be a contradiction in our life.